This is a study of deep ancestry genetics with a biblical perspective. The scientific data on deep ancestry genetics has been largely overlaid with molecule-to-man evolutionism. It's high time then that we applied a biblical perspective on deep ancestry genetic data. Eurasian males who send in a DNA sample for Y chromosome deep ancestry testing receive a migration map and are identified as Haplogroup R, originally from Africa, tens of thousands of years ago. This is a typical Y haplogroup migration map for Eurasian people. But what is a Y chromosome haplogroup? Females have two X reproductive chromosomes. Males have one X and one Y reproductive chromosome. If the father passes on his Y chromosome, a boy is born. If he passes on an X chromosome, a girl is born. The Y chromosome is normally passed from father to son unchanged, but sometimes an SNP mutation occurs on the Y chromosome. An SNP is a single nucleotide polymorphism, and a mutation is a structural alteration in the DNA. Y haplogroups are defined by the SNP mutations or markers that accumulate on the Y chromosome DNA over successive generations. Haplogroups are therefore genetic branches on the family tree of human beings.
DNA is the instruction manual for our bodies. The graphical representation of DNA is two spirals with ladder steps in between, sort of like a circular staircase. Think of sections of this DNA as spelling out individual words in that instruction manual. These sections are called genes, and the little ladder steps within the section are pairs of things called nucleotides, the smallest known component in DNA. In fact, a nucleotide is only 1/1,000,000th of a millimeter across. These ladder steps, or pairs of nucleotides, represent the 4 molecules that make up the letters in the alphabet of genetics. The order of these nucleotides on one gene spell out the meaning or function of that gene. Here's where the breakthrough comes in. Scientists have determined that on some genes, a pair of nucleotides is not the correct letter for that regular configuration of that gene. If you think of a gene as a word that is spelled out in English, such as Mississippi, that might be changed to MISSISSIPPI if one of the letters was wrong. In genetics, this error is called single nucleotide polymorphisms, or SNP for short.
This map shows Y haplogroups of the world before 1500 AD and the subsequent colonizations that took place. And this chart shows the accumulative mutations on the Y chromosome, which, over many generations, have produced the various haplogroups. The rapid rate at which mutations occur indicates that although haplogroups are thought to have originated tens of thousands of years ago, the human race is only a biblical few thousand years old, according to a Nature Genetics article, volume 15 in 1997. The human population growth rate is also evidence that the human race is only a biblical few thousand years old. The United Nations Population Division statistics of 1999 show that the population doubled on average every 139 years between 1500 and 2000 AD. Now, if we look at the Bible account of the flood, only 8 people survived at the time of Noah. The population of the human race in 2011 reached 7 billion. The population therefore had doubled on average every 147 years. So this agrees with the United Nations data on population growth. So remove the imaginary tens of thousands of years invented by evolutionists and apply the haplogroup data to the biblical chronology, which is amply supported by 100 years or more of archaeological research in the Middle East. Also remove the assumption that humans are descended from apes in Africa. The ape and human Y chromosomes, according to the Nature magazine, are remarkably divergent in structure. After the biblical flood, according to the Bible, all were descended from Ham, Shem and Japheth, the sons of Noah. But not from Africa. The descendants of Ham, Shem and Japheth dwelt at Shinar, which is in modern Iraq, and built there what the Bible refers to as the Tower of Babel. From Shinar, people were scattered across all the earth. The separation of languages and habitat resulted in different racial types. According to Bill Bryson in his book The Mother Tongue, people in widely separated places suddenly and spontaneously developed the capacity for language at roughly the same time. It was as if people carried around in their heads, he says, a genetic alarm clock that suddenly went off all around the world and led different groups in widely scattered places on every continent to create languages. The M168 was a mutation or marker that occurred on a founder male who became the ancestor of all haplogroups from C onwards. Now, turning to the Bible in Genesis 9, it's revealed that Shem was singled out from the three sons of Noah as a special male ancestor in God's purpose for mankind. So, M168, Shem, singled out. Ham, Shem and Japheth, founders of all the haplogroups, Genesis chapter 9, followed by Shem singled out in Genesis 9. It follows then that M89 would be the Shemite Abraham, who was again singled out to be a father of many nations, the only man in human history that is ever recorded as being the progenitor of the father of many nations. Ham, Shem and Japheth then, on the chart, ancestor of all the haplogroups, Shem singled out, and then the Shemite Abraham. Abraham, as the founder of many haplogroups, is biblical. He was to be the father of many nations, his descendants to be as numerous as the stars of heaven and the sand upon the seashore. So to return to the migration map, Shem singled out, the Shemite Abraham called to be a father of many nations, and then Jacob, his grandson, who inherited all the promises. His innumerable descendants would spread abroad to the west and east and north and south. Ham, Shem and Japheth, the originator of the haplogroups, Shem singled out, Abraham the father of many nations. And then Jacob, the ancestor of the 12 tribes of Israel. So Shem singled out Abraham, the father of many nations, Jacob, and then his son Joseph, M45. His posterity was promised would be a multitude of nations and a great people. Ham, Shem and Japheth. Shem singled out, Abraham singled out, Jacob and Joseph. Historical and archaeological evidence, both biblical and secular, demonstrates that other than those known as Jews, most of Jacob Israel's 12 tribes, which must have numbered millions, migrated from the Holy Land, some before and some after the Assyrian captivities in the 8th century BC. The Jewish Encyclopedia states that the Israelites who were subjugated by the Assyrian power disappear from the pages of history. The scriptures speak of a future restoration of Israel. The 10 tribes, it says, are certainly in existence. Obviously, they must exist under a different name. They're no longer known as Israelites. In their migrations, it was predicted by Hosea the prophet that the number of the children of Israel should be as the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or numbered. And it shall come to pass that in the place where it was said unto them, Ye are not my people, there it shall be said unto them, Ye are the sons of the living God. They would come under a new covenant. The Jews in biblical times knew that many dispersed Israelites were in Europe. In John 7, Jesus said, Ye shall seek me, and shall not find me. Then said the Jews among themselves, Whither will he go, that we shall not find him? Will he go into the dispersed amongst the Greeks? The Apostle Paul identified the Gentile Greek converts with Israel's Exodus history. All our fathers, he said, were under the cloud, and all passed through the sea, and were all baptized unto Moses in the cloud and in the sea, in 1 Corinthians chapter 10. The Apostle Paul wrote to the Christian converts in Rome in a similar vein, assuming their detailed knowledge of Israel's history, quoting some 56 references in the Hebrew Old Testament. John Wilson studied at Trinity College, Dublin, and extensively searched the migrations of the biblical Israelites, and gave us his lectures on our Israelite origin back in the 19th century. John Wilson drew upon the research of 17th century French scholar Jacques Abadie, who affirmed that the Israelite tribes migrated into that part of the north which in Constantine's time was converted to Christianity. Wilson states we are to look for the descendants of all Israel, not only among the Germans and their Anglo-Saxon offspring, but also in Italy, and especially in France and Switzerland, the Goths, some of whom passed northward into Scandinavia, the Ostrogoths who turned southward into sunny Italy, and the Visigoths into Spain. Back to the migration map, we have Shem, Abraham with marker M89, M9 Jacob, Joseph, a multitude of nations and a great people, M45, which leaves the M207, M173 and M207 markers, which would be the migration founders, individuals who led the migrations of the tribes of Israel across Europe. Ham, Shem and Japheth then, the founder of the haplogroups. Shem singled out as a major founder, Abraham, Jacob, Joseph, markers on the migration leaders. And so you say, what about the Jews? The Jewish nation was formed in the 5th century BC, consisting of some Israelites, but only from the tribes of Judah, Benjamin and Levi in Ezra 1. They remained in the Holy Land for several hundred years after the majority of Israelites had commenced their migrations into Asia and Europe. So Jews do not share all the same haplogroup markers as their migrating kinsmen Israelites. So we can say that God has honoured his promises to Abraham and Jacob, Israel, principally in the Christian nations of the Nordic, Anglo-Saxon, Celtic and related peoples. In this biblical perspective, we can see the promises fulfilled. Thou shalt spread abroad to the west and to the east, to the north and to the south. A nation and company of nations. And in thee and thy seed all the families of the earth blessed. And so spreading abroad to the west and the east, the north and the south, prolific colonizers. Nation and company of nations, many nations. Thee and thy seed all the families of the earth blessed. All Bible commentators would agree that refers to being agents of Christian missions and spreading abroad the Christian gospel.